I'm giving away this beautiful Arcade Classics mini Mortal Kombat arcade machine. If you'd like to enter to win, all you have to do is be signed up at patreon.com/616entertainment at any level. Also, don't forget you can grab a t-shirt over at prowrestlingtees.com/616entertainment. We got all kinds of shirts over there. This video is also brought to you in part by the Patreon producers, without whom big projects like this wouldn't be possible. Now let's get to it. We've spent the vast majority of this series celebrating Resident Evil for what it truly is, which is not only the most popular survival horror franchise of all time, but the greatest survival horror franchise of all time, in my opinion. And if there's one thing we know for sure, it's that anytime a property gains a ton of traction and prints money for the people in charge, you can bet your ass they're gonna slap that logo on as many products as possible. That's where the term spin-off comes into play. A spin-off is an extension of an already established entity. In the gaming category, you can point to titles like Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, Portal, or for a super modern example, Apex Legends. But for every Mario Party out there in the spin-off realm, there's something equally horrible to accompany it. And unfortunately, not even our beloved Resident Evil was immune to the spin-off virus. Hello Dan-Dans, welcome to the History of Resident Evil Part 4, the spin-off virus. You know, with the genre-defining classics and blockbuster successes we've covered up to this point, it's hard to believe that Resident Evil could even be the home of such a colossal misfire, but it is what it is. We have 4 spin-off titles to dive into today, and I don't want to waste any time, so let's get right to it. The first game on the docket is called Resident Evil Survivor, Dan-Dans. It's a pretty cool title, right? Like, Survivor? Survivor of what? Has this guy seen some crazy shit? Probably. Look at the fucker standing behind him, for Christ's sake. The game released in August of 2000 here in the US, and, I mean, let's not beat around the bush, it sucks. There's no real horror to speak of, outside of maybe the game's overall presentation.
You're not going to get away.
The graphics leave a ton to be desired, and you know what? Let's pump the brakes and talk about where this title even comes from before we go any further into how it feels. First of all, Survivor was not directed by Hideki Kamiya. It wasn't written by Nobuo Shigemura, and Shinji Mikami probably wouldn't even know what you were talking about if you brought this game up to him in person. In short, this wasn't a Capcom production. Sure, they published the game, but the creation of the product was outsourced to a developer called Toes, whose previous works had included the wrestling title Muscle on the NES, a shitload of 16-bit Dragon Ball Z games, and even the highly acclaimed Metal Gear Solid Ghost Battle on the Game Boy Color. Many casual fans of the series look at Resident Evil 7, Biohazard, as the introduction of the first-person perspective to the franchise. But those of us who have been down and dirty in the trenches from the very beginning know, Survivor staked that claim 17 years prior. When it comes to this game's story, there's an argument as to whether it does or does not belong in the overall Resident Evil canon. But that's an argument I have zero interest in taking part in, and I'll tell you why. You will never see any of these characters again. Nothing overly important happens in this story. So, include it, don't include it, it doesn't matter, I don't care. Being that this story is entirely inconsequential, we're not going to spend 20 minutes explaining all the ins and outs. There's really no point. Here are the cliff notes. Our main character has no memory and is led to believe his name is Vincent Goldman, who we learn works for Umbrella.
Goldman! Do you know what you're doing?
No, not that guy. Vincent was responsible for the T-virus outbreak on this island and is a bad person in general. Long story short, our guy isn't Vincent. His name is Ark Thompson, an acquaintance of Leon Kennedy who was sent here to investigate. I'm not kidding. An acquaintance. He's literally some dude Leon knew who he told, hey, go check that shit out. This is as slapped together as it gets, Dan-Dans. Along the way, we meet these 2 little girls who serve no real purpose for anything. We fight the bad guys and escape to safety as the island's self-destruct sequence blows all the evidence to smithereens. Now that we've established that this game could literally not exist and you wouldn't even notice a change in Resident Evil's overall story, let's get back into how it feels to actually play this thing. If you're anything like me, the initial thought that pops into your head upon seeing gameplay is, wow, it's first person. If you're anything else like me, you're next going to wonder, hey, why can't I see my character's hands? Where's this gun I'm shooting? Why am I only seeing a reticle? What is this, Time Crisis? Shouldn't I be holding a light gun? And that, Dan, is a great question. You see, in Japan, this game was called Resident Evil Gun Survivor, which is a little strange, but it's not any weirder than some of the other Japanese titles of popular American video games. You ever played Exciting Pro Wrestling 3? The Japanese version, and European version for that matter, were indeed compatible with a light gun, specifically the Namco Gun-Con. You know the drill, it's the same idea as Duck Hunt. When there's an enemy on screen, you point, shoot, and the world is yours. So why the hell is the American version of Survivor not compatible with the damn Gun-Con?
The investigation into the high school massacre is slow-moving and dangerous. The two gunmen who went on the rampage booby-trapped the building and even themselves.
Oh. Fuck. Listen, I don't fall into the camp that thinks that video games turn non-violent people into violent people. I don't believe that at all. But I definitely understand the business decision from Capcom to not encourage players to put a gun in their hands so close to such a horrible tragedy. Gun violence in America isn't really a topic I want to go deep into inside of a fun video game retrospective, so let's move on. Let me tell you something about playing a light gun game with a fucking D-pad, Dan. It sucks. It's like going to a friend's house and they're like, here, you can use this controller. Lining up a shot is like throwing a punch underwater. Adding on to the list of oddities in this game, it's pop quiz time. How do you investigate an item or open a door in Resident Evil games?
Yeah, you walk up to something, you push the button, and there you go. Everybody knows that.
Exactly. Only in this game, simply walking up to a door triggers the whole thing. And it's not just opening doors, but reading text or checking on an item. No less than 50 times throughout the game, you'll see something off in the distance, run over to it and press X to read the text. Only the text showed up before you even pressed X, and pressing X skipped the first line before you could even read it, causing you to have to start the whole process over again. We get it. What does it say? So now, do we go through the gate? What? I'm still not used to the text just popping up. I promise you, you'll never get used to it. Survivor features many of the enemies from the first two games, only there's no real rhyme or reason for them being where they are. You'll find liquors inside of a library. All the zombies look identical to those in Resident Evil 2 because they're reused assets. And honestly, none of them are all that interested in attacking you. Have you ever seen a licker this incompetent? I kind of feel bad for killing him. He might have just been really interested in my boots. Mr. X is here because, they have all these assets from RE2, why not? He's a total pushover in this game. Just run and shoot. He'll never catch you. The real head scratcher here are the UT troopers. Zero explanation is given for them in the game, but in researching their background on the internet, you'll find that they're often referred to as the trash sweepers or the Undertaker unit. They're umbrella-employed SWAT kind of soldiers who are definitely not human. They scream like a jaguar crossbred with a baboon. And when you kill them, they disappear. Ugh. You'll never see or hear about these things ever again in the entire history of Resident Evil, so we're just gonna move on. The main boss is yet another species of tyrant, this time known as the Hypnos Tyrant. Take a look at how this thing is introduced to us.
Liar! Who else could you be? You are Vincent. You're a murderer. Now die!
I told you this game sucks. We fight 3 different forms of this thing throughout the final 15 minutes of the game. And no, none of them are particularly difficult to take down. When my brother and I were kids, we used to think that this tyrant was female, based on its torso, and overall slender physique, but that's apparently not the case. It's just, I don't know, designed weird. It's perfectly okay to question whether I'm only shitting on this game because I'm almost 30 years old now. I'm cynical, my childhood wonder is gone. But I assure you, 20 years ago when my buddy Tim got this game, we knew it sucked. Even at 10 years old, we recognized how awful the voice acting was.
I won't allow you to escape. You're going to pay for what you've done. What? Helicopter? No.
We noticed the comical misspellings and typos in the text. Our absolute favorite moment, though, was when our guy enters a room that has hundreds of photographs pinned to the walls. There are dozens more scattered on the desks and floors in the room. It's all you can see in here. Pictures. Pictures everywhere. And what does Ark Thompson say when he approaches the desk?
A picture.
Unfucking believable. That's like walking up to this and going, wow, a wasp. Luckily, this entire game can be beaten in about 90 minutes, so even if you're a completionist, it won't hurt for too long. As you might imagine, Survivor was, pardon the pun, eaten alive by critics, and rightfully so. Sales-wise, it impressively moved nearly 500,000 units, and hey, that's exactly what Capcom was hoping for. They knew this was a half-assed entry into the series. It was a cash grab. And at $50 a pop, that's not a bad return on your investment. Its sequel, Resident Evil Survivor 2, Code Veronica, would release in arcades and eventually on the PlayStation 2 in 2001, but it would never see a North American release. But the days of light gun-powered Resident Evil titles did not stop there, oh no. In the summer of 2003, the final installment of the Survivor series was released on the PlayStation 2. This is Resident Evil Dead Aim. Actually, you know what? It's not Resident Evil Dead Aim. Not yet. We're gonna make a quick, unadvertised detour into the land of handhelds. Normally, in my history of documentaries, I don't delve into this side of things. I'll get asked, why didn't you cover the PSP version of Mortal Kombat Deception, which was called Mortal Kombat Unchained? Well, you said it yourself. It's just the PSP version of the exact same game we just spent 20 minutes on. Those are the two most common occurrences with portable versions of games established on home consoles. They're either the same game, just smaller, or they're the same game, but butchered into oblivion to the point that you'd never want to play them in the first place. But in the realm of Resident Evil, that's not the case. Resident Evil Gaiden was released in North America in June of 2002 for the Game Boy Color. Real quick, be honest, did you even know that this game existed? If not, that's fine. I didn't know until way after this game had come and gone, and I'm a big Resident Evil fan, obviously. I don't know anyone who owned this game then, and I don't know anyone who owns this game now. I worked at and managed a video game resale shop for 9 years, and in those 9 years, I saw everything. Cowboy Kid on NES, Earthbound complete in box, Panzer Dragoon Saga factory sealed. I saw everything, but Resident Evil Gaiden? Never once. I hate to disappoint you guys, but I've never even laid eyes on one of these cartridges in my life, which means I've never played this game. I can tell you that you play as Resident Evil 2 star Leon Kennedy, with the assistance of Resident Evil 1's Barry Burton. We're rescuing a little girl from a troubled cruise ship called Starlight, and the gameplay looks like what you're seeing on screen. The story is not canon at all, which means it doesn't really matter what happens, which also means I'm not going to bother going into detail. The game did not review very well. It gained next to zero notoriety for being an entry in such a popular series, and if you're looking to pick up a copy today, good luck with that. Its general scarcity has led to this one commanding a pretty penny on the used market, and God help you if you're a complete inbox collector of the Game Boy Color library. And now that we have indeed given Resident Evil Gaiden its time in the sun, even though it's a non-canonical handheld game, let's get back to business. What was the line? I'm just gonna play it back. In the summer of 2003, the final installment of the Survivor series was released on the PlayStation 2. This is Resident Evil Dead Aim. The first time Resident Evil Dead Aim came to my attention was through a magazine article in either late 2002 or early 2003. The reason I'm not certain is because I don't have the magazine anymore, and even after spending hours online looking for that damn preview article, I can't find it. So, it's a mystery. But this portion of the video beginning with a mystery is quite befitting of my experience with Resident Evil Dead Aim, as until I started working on this history of series, I had never laid hands on the game. Like Resident Evil Gaiden, which we just covered, none of my friends had a copy of Dead Aim. Not even my most die-hard survival horror fan friends saved up their allowance for this one. None of them put it on their Christmas list. None of them even rented it from the video store. It was 2003. We were all 12 and 13 years old. We didn't have jobs. We couldn't spend $40 or $50 on a game like it was nothing. We didn't even have $40 or $50. So, for all of us, Dead Aim came and went like a thief in the night, and we didn't really care. And it's not like I didn't care just because of that unimpressive magazine preview. I mean, the Resident Evil remake as well as RE0 had both come out the prior year. Dead Aim was, how do I put this nicely? It didn't look like a game that should have come out after those two. You guys know the drill by now, these are spin-off games. These characters, you'll never see them again. This story might as well not exist. So, we're gonna fast forward through this sumbitch. There are only 3 actual characters of any substance in this entire game. One of them is this man, our main heel, Morpheus D. Duvall. What a fucking name for a bad guy. You wanna know how ridiculous this plot is? It's a doozy, man. Morpheus here used to work for Umbrella. He has hijacked this Umbrella-owned cruise ship which was carrying all sorts of T-virus samples and monsters and whatnot. He let them all loose, and now he is holding the entire world ransom for billions of dollars. If nobody pays up, his people are going to launch missiles all over the world that are filled with the T-virus, which could effectively be the end of humanity as we know it. If that doesn't strike you as the most far-fetched, stupid-ass plotline we've covered across this entire series so far, man, I don't know what to tell you. Character number 2 is our main man, our playable character, Bruce McGivern. He was sent here to, what else? Collect the T-virus samples and stop all the bad shit from happening, as usual. This woman is Fong Ling. She was sent here to do the same thing, but by a different company, making her and Bruce direct competition for each other. And seriously, it goes exactly how you expect it to. There are nasty creatures in the way, the main bad guy transforms himself into a boss enemy by injecting himself with the T plus G virus, which is hilarious. And in the end, the game's setting explodes after a self-destruct sequence blew it to hell. So wait, the main characters died? No, they lived. They were in this submarine life pod thing. I don't know, who cares? They've never been seen or heard from again, and they never will. That was fast, but that's just the story. When it comes to these spin-off titles, the way they feel is what's most important. So let's talk about that. Well, it is worth noting that this light gun game is actually compatible with a light gun. They say that time heals all wounds, and in North America, that proved to be the case. And here's the deal, guys. Full disclosure, I didn't play with the Namco GunCon 2. And to be honest, most people didn't. Most people didn't even have the GunCon 2. Across its entire history, the GunCon 2 was compatible with 14 games. That's right, 14. You're looking at the entire library right here. So, once again, most people were playing this game that was designed with a light gun in mind with a standard controller. And how does it feel, you ask? It feels like shit. In most Resident Evil games up to this point, the left and right buttons would turn your character, and the up and down buttons moved your character. In Dead Aim, every directional button moves you in that direction. Bruce, our brain-dead main character, navigates his way down hallways like no one I've ever seen before. Intricate turns, like facing a control panel situated on a wall, for instance, are a pain in the ass to pull off. Getting this moron to stand where he's supposed to feels like watching somebody who's not a good driver backing in and out of a parking space because they're not lined up correctly. And how's this for a mechanic that makes you think, what are you talking about? Running, in almost any video game ever, occurs when traveling in one direction while holding a run button down, right? Right. Well, in Dead Aim, running is your standard movement. You need to hold down a button to walk. Who the fuck wants to have a walk button when you can run everywhere? And now you're thinking, wait, I thought this was a light gun game. Why am I seeing third-person action gameplay? Well, because dead aim is only a light gun game when you're shooting. When faced with enemies, we've got to tap R1 to look down the sights. Outside of combat, this one is all third person. The game does not feel good to play. It just doesn't. It is what it is. Does it feel better than Survivor? I mean, yeah, I'll give it that. These controls are something you can figure out, but that doesn't mean it's a good game. It just means that these controls suck and you're gonna have to get used to them. Gameplay is the most important part of any video game. That's true across the board. But in some cases, good presentation can be a saving grace. Does dead aim fall into that category? Well, check out the quality of these cutscenes, you tell me.
Why did you save me? Your first priority should have been to disarm the missiles.
A Dongguan never abandons a woman.
Is it just me, or can you barely fucking hear anything anyone is saying? And the way these lethal operatives working for opposing companies just immediately start playing this coy romance angle for absolutely no reason, please. Okay, how about the soundtrack? The Resident Evil games are known for their fantastic music. Check out what Dead Aim brings to the table. God damn it! There is no fucking music. There's a save room track and a few songs for major enemy encounters, but they're very rare, so I really, really hope you enjoy the ambient sounds of being on an empty cruise ship. There's a must when it comes to designing any Resident Evil game. Every new installment must have at least one new monster. And hey, Dead Aim brings several new bad guys to the party. We've got the Tyrant 091, which is, you guessed it, a failed Tyrant experiment. This poor bastard was infected with the T+G virus, and, well, he sucks. In place of arms, he has long fingers, or tentacles, growing out of his shoulders. Jesus, they really ran out of ideas here, huh? We've got the Hunter Elite. This fucked up frog-looking thing is called Glimmer. This big fat fuck is called Pluto. And hey, you'll never see any of these monsters again, so don't get attached. There is one enemy that stands out from the crowd though. Our buddy Morpheus Duval, as previously stated, injects himself with the T+G virus. His transformation turns him into, drumroll please, not just the only female tyrant we've ever seen, but the only tyrant that's ever had feet shaped like fucking high heels. And they're not just shaped like high heels, they are legit heels. You can hear them clicking on the floors like it's fucking Tyra Banks walking into the room. You may have some questions, and that's fine, because this doesn't make any fucking sense. I mean, let's go with what we know. Morpheus was obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with beauty. His whole goal was to erase this cold, ugly world and replace it with a beautiful one. He's obviously very into himself, but why does his transformation process turn him into a female tyrant? Well, that's up to us to decide, because as you may have guessed, it's never really explained. One option is that his idea of beauty is an extremely powerful, yet elegant, woman. Another option is that maybe he feels like a woman on the inside, and when the virus reshaped him, it allowed him to become who he truly is. I mean, I don't fucking know. At this very moment, you and I are putting way more thought into this scenario than the designers did, so what does it matter? Also, either one of these scenarios I described could be true. It still doesn't make any sense as to why this monster has high heels for feet. If you want my real opinion, I think it's most likely that this monster was designed by some hunty who wanted to see a tyrant who could slay while slaying. Anything's possible. Upon its North American release in June of 2003, Resident Evil Dead Aim was met with middle-of-the-road reviews from critics. The game did not sell well, at all. And once this one was in the books, the plug was pulled on the light gun-powered Survivor series for good. Is Resident Evil Dead Aim a complete pile of shit? No, it isn't. I was rough on it here, and the game deserves that treatment. But it's not the worst game in the franchise, that's for sure. Graphically, it's bland and behind the times. The gameplay is sluggish and annoying, and the overall presentation is boring. And that, Dan, is the main takeaway from this entire game. It's boring. Resident Evil Survivor sucks. It's really, really bad. But it's kind of bad in the same way that The Room is bad, at least in some moments. Dead Aim is just so uninspired, so blah and bland that it's boring. And boring, in my opinion, is the worst thing any piece of entertainment can possibly be. But now, with our light guns left somewhere in the past, it's time to move on to the main event of the evening. You know, in prior installments of the history of Resident Evil, we've talked about how, at times, Capcom had a million Resident Evil projects in production all at the same time. And this is no different. Less than a year after Dead Aim's release in the United States, a new game would hit the market, with brand new innovations up its sleeve. We began this series diving into 1989's Sweet Home for Nintendo's Famicom home game console. An era dominated by 8 bits, 2 buttons, and a ton of imagination. And as the times change, so too does the technology surrounding us. From the Famicom to the PlayStation, over to the Sega swan song that was the Dreamcast, and everywhere in between, the times had indeed changed. Many gamers were introduced to playing video games online when they got their PlayStation 3 or their Xbox 360. I knew the concept of playing online with people from all over the world had existed prior to this generation, sure, but I hadn't done it yet. Hell, I was blown away in my teenage years when I learned that the NES technically had internet capabilities through the unreleased teleplay modem. The goddamn Sega Genesis had a fully operational online service called the Sega Channel. This stuff was way, way ahead of its time. But why am I talking about online gaming? Well, it was only a matter of time until the T-Virus itself leaked onto the internet. It was at Sony's 2002 E3 conference that Resident Evil Outbreak was first revealed. A cooperative, multiplayer, online-focused Resident Evil game? Exclusive to the PlayStation 2? How the hell was this gonna work? Here's the deal. There are 5 levels, or scenarios, to play through. We select one of the 8 playable characters, we're matched up with random partners, and it's off to the races. If you were anything like me in early 2004 when this game released, you had no idea how to connect a modem to your PlayStation 2 and play games online. The entire concept was foreign to me, so sadly, I never partook in the online side of Outbreak. How does it differ from the single-player portion of the game, you ask? It doesn't, really. It's the same game. I just always had AI partners rather than actual humans on my side. Outbreak's 5 scenarios don't follow a set timeline, and there's not a story to tell as much as there are experiences to play through. Now, we've covered a few bad games here on the history of Resident Evil Part 4, and you've probably had it up to fucking here with my complaints on that front, but I have good news. You are in luck. Resident Evil Outbreak is a pretty good game. I have to say, right at the top, the intro video for this game is a 10 out of 10. A+, gold star, chef's kiss, fucking amazing. I'm taking a major risk as far as demonetization goes playing some of this song, but oh my goodness, Dan Bands. This music and its accompanying visuals, which set us firmly in the timeline just before Resident Evil 2 takes place, my god. truly incredible stuff, and I'm not joking when I say this is my favorite part of the game. So presentation-wise, we're already firing on all cylinders. But how are the cutscenes? Are they top-notch as well, or are they hot dog shit? Hopefully we're in agreement here, but these visuals get a high ranking in my book. Being that this was the first game in the franchise to ever feature online play, obviously we're in for a handful of surprises and new mechanics. Having partners that work alongside us from the beginning of each level has its pluses and its minuses. First of all, I enjoy letting my partners blast away at enemies while I stroll on by like Michael Jackson. A strategy which keeps my pockets full of unwasted ammunition. That right there, though, is an ideal scenario. Sometimes you'll find that your partners are too stupid to pick up weapons. They'll walk right past a steel pipe, even a handgun, and not bat an eyelash. This makes them completely useless and frustrating to even be around. You're a cop. You're telling me your Billy Baldwin looking ass couldn't have picked up a weapon or at least given one to your partner? Fuck you. What's really interesting is that even though this game was designed with online play in mind, headset and microphone compatibility was purposely left out. The developers felt like letting players openly communicate would ruin the tense and suspenseful atmosphere that Resident Evil is known for. That means that even if I had a human partner with me who may not have noticed a useful weapon on the ground, I wouldn't be able to say, "Hey dude, you just ran past a shotgun, grab that shit." I'd be forced to communicate Capcom's way, which was with what they called an ad-lib system. Tapping the square button causes your character to shout something completely random, so that's odd.
There you go. Move!
Come on! Help me, please! Perhaps you'll allow... Help me!
Yes. This is it.
I remember phrases like,
"Did you find anything?"
I can't find anything.
"I'll look for something."
Check over here.
"Did you find anything?"
Were repeated so many times in such a short span that my dad shouted from down the hall, "God damn, I hope somebody fucking finds something." But there are indeed a few targeted phrases in our selection. But guess what? They suck. Holding down L2 will allow us to choose who to shout to, although that requires knowing where everyone is. As instead of the buttons being mapped to individual character names, they're mapped to who is to your right, who's to your left, who's behind you, so on and so forth. It's
so bad.
The commands we have are go, come on, help, and thanks. That might sound useful in the moment, but what was the very first scenario I pitched you as an example of something I would need to communicate? How the hell am I supposed to warn someone that they missed something useful when all I can say is go, come on, help, or thanks? Ugh. I don't know about you guys, but when my friends and I were younger, there was one thing we always wanted to do in these games that we never could. Sure, we've got big, powerful weapons, we can play as different characters across these titles, but what if we could actually become a zombie? Resident Evil Outbreak finally lifted the veil on what it's like to become undead. You see, every character doesn't just have a standard health bar that ranges from fine to danger. We've also got a virus meter. Apparently, we're all a little bit infected. How do we get infected? Who knows? How are we able to survive the infection when there's not a large amount of any cure known to the public? Who knows? Listen, don't think about it too hard. It's just a cool little game mechanic, alright? Steering clear of enemies keeps that infection meter low, which means we're safe and sound. Taking damage, though, starts pumping those numbers up like they just got a pep talk from Matthew McConaughey.
Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
If your virus meter hits 3 digits, it's curtains for you, my friend. This is where the infection truly takes hold. Our corpse is reanimated, and we finally feel what it's like to walk in the shoes of the undead. But that's only if you are connected to the internet. In offline mode, the zombification process never occurs. So even though the box says we can become a zombie, and my brother and I were extremely excited to finally experience such a thing, it was not to be. God damn it. The first of the game's 5 levels, or scenarios, is called Outbreak. It's a normal, quiet night in Raccoon City. Patrons fill a local bar, having drinks, eating some late night food. It's actually quite nice. I've always found this quick scene to be really, really cool. Seeing Raccoon City in its pre-T-Virus days is like seeing Bioshock's Rapture before the underwater metropolis fell apart, when it was still thriving and in its prime. But sadly, it doesn't take long for things to turn sideways. An unruly customer causes a ruckus and Oh boy, that's not just some unruly customer, is it? That is a zombie. This first chapter is an escape mission. We need to get the hell out of this bar by hell or high water and find our way to safety. The second scenario is called Below Freezing Point, and it takes place in a very familiar location. This is the underground lab from Resident Evil 2. There's a bit of story attached to this one. This nasty lady is a co-worker of one of our playable characters, Yoko. But the nasty lady sucks. She's stealing highly confidential research, and it doesn't really work out for her. Below Freezing Point introduces our first boss fight, where we tango with the G-Virus embryo that burst from this shitty woman's chest. This thing is gross, but like all the others, it doesn't stand a chance against us. Several of my favorite moments from this game are found in this scenario. I love coming across the hunters that were frozen in place when the lab's temperature suddenly plummeted. I love simply re-exploring these familiar halls. It feels nostalgic. Did someone say nostalgic? Scenario number 3 drops us into Raccoon General Hospital. Yes sir, the very same hospital we fought through in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. But Nemesis isn't the only game this level pulls pieces of the past from. Our main obstacle here is a fucking leech man. This poor doctor is completely overtaken by a swarm of the leeches that were tested on by Dr. James Marcus, and he's unkillable when it comes to our weaponry. Trapping him in a temperature-controlled room and burning him alive is the only way to stop him, and that is not an extremely easy feat to pull off. How are these leeches still alive and operating when there's no James Marcus to control them? Who knows? It's a little bit of Spinoff fuckery, but that's alright. No one's really taking any of this seriously anyway. Hellfire is the name of Scenario 4, and that's because our unlucky asses are trapped inside a burning building. A burning hotel, to be exact. Stepping out of the shattered windows and shimmying across inches-thin ledges at deadly heights is very, very cool, and that's for damn sure. If the developers were looking to add tension to the mix, this was a good way to do it. Not to mention that this hotel is swarming, and I mean swarming with lickers. These lickers don't look like the ones we're used to from Resident Evil 2 and 3. They look like some sort of skinnier hybrid, but they're not. They're just called lickers with no explanation as to why they look so different, but honestly, I don't care. I think they look cool, and in my head, they are a weird hybrid. Let's go with that. The fifth and final scenario is the longest and most difficult across the entire game. And that makes sense, right? I mean, it's the big main event. But it's not just the finality of it that makes this one stand out. If you thought we were going to get through an entire Resident Evil game without an appearance of a tyrant, you are out of your fucking mind. This thing is called the Thanatos Tyrant, and it was built by a rogue umbrella scientist. This guy here is the creator of the monster. His whole angle is that mass production is bad. We only need one of my beautiful creations, blah blah blah. The Thanatos Tyrant certainly is unique. And you might ask, how is it unique? Does it have gray skin like Mr. X? Nope. Is it all bundled up like Nemesis? No sir. Does it have weird shoulder fingers like that shithead from Dead Aim? Wrong again. The Thanatos Tyrant is, get ready for this, a giant black man wearing a fucking Speedo. This is so strange on so many levels. It's unlike anything we've seen before. Why does it have to wear underwear? Does it have a dick and balls? If so, why? It's not made to reproduce, it's made to be a fucking super soldier. This thing was 2 more days of scientific testing away from coming out a perfect copy of Makad Brooks. Man, that doctor had some pretty specific taste, huh? Why can't I make my own tyrant? You think I wouldn't like a death machine that looks exactly like Brandy Rhodes following me around? What am I even talking about? Look, here's what's funny about me saying it's weird that this tyrant looks so human. Back in part 2 of this series, I questioned why Nemesis was so ugly. I questioned the logic in not making your super soldier look more normal. A monster is something you see coming a mile away, but a normal looking person with super strength? That's a surefire success. Well, this crazy bastard was doing just that. He was creating a much more human, a much more normal looking tyrant. And I still think it's fucking weird. Moral of the story, don't listen to me when it comes to tyrant design. I don't know what I want, outside of my own tyrant that looks like Brandy Rose. It's not just the tyrant that makes this final scenario so crazy though. We've seen giant spiders across the series, we've seen giant alligators, moths, all kinds of magnified animals. But how about giant fucking wasps?
Oh, hell no!
When it's all said and done, our ragtag group of heroes must escape the city before it's destroyed, which we already knew was coming because this is practically a non-canon prequel. And again, don't argue with me whether it's canon or not, it's not worth it. All these people were created specifically for this game. Nothing important happens and they're all thrown back to the bottom of the toy box. So it really doesn't matter. There's an argument to be made that Outbreak was ahead of its time. And I do think that a cooperative, online multiplayer Resident Evil game on the PlayStation 3 would have gone over a lot smoother. Not that one, I mean this game, just on that hardware. With a better communication system, you know? Because here's the deal, Outbreak is not a bad game. Its presentation is its strongest asset, and it excels in that department big time. The gameplay, while not perfect by any means, isn't bad either. When I was 13 years old and this one dropped in my lap out of nowhere, I was very pleased with it. I got lost a bunch because the game can be extremely obtuse, and I was annoyed with my idiotic partners, but the overall experience is one I enjoyed. Do I recommend it now? Not really, no. The controls haven't aged all that well, and the North American online servers have been shut down for almost 15 years, so it's not like you and your friends can fire this one up and escape Raccoon City together. At the end of the day, Outbreak tried something new. It reviewed better than any of the other spin-offs we've covered so far, that's a fact. And sales-wise, man, it moved more than 1 million units, which is very impressive. Resident Evil Outbreak's critical and commercial success made it a no-brainer for Capcom to follow it up with a sequel. Almost exactly a year after the first installment's release, Resident Evil Outbreak File Number 2 hit store shelves. Here's the thing, if you wanted a brand new, upgraded, better looking and better feeling game, you're shit out of luck. But if you love the first Outbreak and just want more of the same, well, you're gonna have a blast, because that's exactly what File Number 2 is. See, the first game had 5 scenarios to play through with 8 different characters, although the developers had 10 scenarios in the works at the time. Outbreak Number 2 gives us those same exact 8 characters from the original with 5 new scenarios. And by new, I mean they finished the 5 that weren't ready for last year's launch. All 5 scenarios take place in Raccoon City, and you're wondering how that's possible, seeing as though we saw the city get wiped off the face of the planet at the end of the last game. Well, nope, that didn't happen. Not yet. It happens at the end of this game, so just pretend that we didn't see that before, okay? So, yeah, even though this is called a sequel, it's really just an expansion on the first game. If downloadable content was a common thing back in 2005, this definitely would have been sold as DLC. Remember the opening from the first Outbreak? How beautiful the music was, how impressive the visuals were? Well, they used the same song again, and not nearly as much love went into the video side of things this time. We'll cover the 5 scenarios though, as there's not much else to really talk about on the new side of things. The first level is called Wild Things. Our characters are trapped inside of the Raccoon City Zoo, where unfortunately, the virus has wreaked havoc. We see dead silverback gorillas on the ground, zombies are tearing at the flesh of a rhino. It's really insane to see. I'm a little torn on this. As an animal lover, I don't like seeing these animals dead. But it's not real, so whatever. The thing that bothers me more than that, though, is, are you trying to tell me that these shambling, weak-ass zombie humans were able to take down a full-grown gorilla? Or a rhino? Get the fuck out of here. Put 10 strong, living, healthy men in an enclosure with a silverback and tell me how that turns out for them. I don't think so. Maybe the animals took down and ingested the blood of the zombies, rather than being taken down themselves. That I could buy. Anyway, Jesus Christ, I could talk about the animals all day. The coolest part of this stage is having to swim through the crocodile enclosure to get to the other side, which, fuck no. I hate that shit. Underwater animals, water I can't see in, the ocean in general, no thank you. Scary, scary, scary. Scarier than zombies. Any day of the week. But guys, the final boss, depending on how you play, is either an infected male lion or a fucking elephant. Both of these things are horrific to think about, infected or not. I'd actually be more scared if they weren't infected. I would rather fight the Makad Brooks underwear tyrant 100 times than deal with anything from this level at all. The second scenario, Underbelly, has us traveling through the subway tunnels. Of course it's not an easy ride. The trains won't run until we solve puzzles and find keys. You know how it works around here. What's the hook in this stage, you ask? Big ass fleas. That's it. Just big fleas that do somersaults at you. These may be the most uninspired enemies in Resident Evil history. But if you're not impressed with giant fleas, how about a gianter flea? Okay. Flashback is set in and around a hospital that is overrun by a bloodthirsty plant. This old man is trying to help us make our escape. A hooded madman with an axe shows up and chases us across wooden bridges, through tight hallways. And wouldn't you know it, at the end, that old man is revealed to have been the madman all along. He had been leading unsuspecting passers-by into this plant's lair where it would siphon the life from their bodies. Why? Because that plant had sprung from his dearly departed wife, whom he couldn't bear to see wither away. This is actually a very interesting plotline, which is nice, as nearly all of the 10 Outbreak scenarios are just, hey, go to the safe zone. The old man and his wife reunite once the plant is defeated, and are crushed when the hospital roof caves in. Scenario number 4 is called Desperate Times, and it's set in the Raccoon Police Department, straight out of Resident Evil 2. Exploring these halls inside of a PlayStation 2 game 6 years after its last appearance in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is pretty fucking cool, that's for sure. Finding the holding cells and seeing all of the prisoners alive and well is freaky, being that we know what's gonna happen to these guys. Oh shit, remember this dude? Sorry man, I wish we could have warned you or something. Our group of characters is bolstered by another partner, none other than Marvin, the wounded police officer from Resident Evil 2. When a horde breaks in, we do our best to fend them off, but Marvin is left behind. He's taken some damage, and the scenario ends with him locking himself inside the office, where he'd be discovered by either Claire or Leon just a few hours later in the opening moments of Resident Evil 2. The fifth and final stage, End of the Road, sees us once again inside an Umbrella laboratory. We're supported in our quest by 2 scientists by the names of Linda and Carter. I wonder if these writers were Wonder Woman fans. This lab is filled to the brim with hunters, which obviously is not a good thing. But guess what these 2 geniuses have up their sleeve? A tyrant! A tyrant that actually works the way it's supposed to. A super soldier that can be controlled in battle. What an amazing thing this is, to see Umbrella's hard work finally pay off. Yeah, it doesn't last long. The tyrant says, fuck this you controlling me business, and kills Carter real good. Now he's chasing us, because what the hell else is he gonna do? Things get really weird when these mercenaries drop a freight box filled with this tentacle monster. This amorphous blob even swallows the tyrant. And there you have our final boss. I feel bad for this fucking thing. Just put it out of its misery. That right there is Resident Evil Outbreak file number 2. Now you might have noticed I didn't interject any personal stories on this one. Nothing about my buddy Tim, nothing about my brother. No stories from my own past. Well, the why for that is pretty simple. I didn't own this one, and neither did they, and neither did almost anybody else. The sales for Resident Evil Outbreak file number 2 were so low, so shockingly low, Capcom canceled plans for Resident Evil Outbreak 3 altogether. If you go rooting around, you might notice that there's a huge gap between the value of Outbreak and Outbreak 2, and the reason is scarcity. Nobody bought Outbreak 2, which means there aren't that many copies out there in the used market, which means you're going to pay more for it if you really want to play it. Outbreak 2 didn't review as well as the first game for several reasons. First off, many critics weren't very impressed with the upgrades. As in, there aren't really any upgrades to speak of on the gameplay side of things, so there's that. What's funny is that I mentioned previously that the servers had been shut off for these games, making the true online experience impossible to recreate. But that's been remedied. A hardcore group of fans in 2014 resurrected Outbreak 2 servers, and with a little bit of jimmying and a very detailed walkthrough that you can find both on screen here and down in the description, you too can join the fun all over again. The Outbreak games are not the first installments of the series that jump to the front of anyone's minds when the words Resident Evil are brought up in conversation, but I do believe that they should be celebrated. Taking a chance doesn't always pay off, but this time, I think it did. And any game that has a fan base hardcore enough to bring it back to life on their own time and dime speaks volumes to the impact it made in its debut. With these online capabilities having been killed by Capcom in 2011, only to be reanimated in 2014, you could argue that Outbreak is the only true undead chapter in Resident Evil's entire catalog. That's gonna do it, Dan Dans. Thank you so much for joining me for this, The History of Resident Evil Part 4, The Spinoff Virus. Not every game we covered here today was great, but all in all, I think we had a pretty good time. Next month is the big finale. The History of Resident Evil Part 5, The New Face of Fear, will premiere just in time for Halloween. And if you're signed up over at patreon.com/616entertainment, you might just get some early access along with some other goodies. This survival horror journey has been so much fun, and I can't wait to wrap it up next time out. But until then, I love ya, and I will see you next time.